Why buying cheap boots will keep you poor forever. Have you ever stood in a store, holding two versions of the same thing? The one you can afford and the one you actually want. And then 6 months later, you're back in that same store, buying the same cheap thing again, because the first one fell apart? Most people have been there. And when that happens, they feel a specific kind of shame. A lack of discipline, maybe. Bad choices. Poor planning. That feeling, that shame, is one of the most expensive lies the economic system has ever told you. What just happened to you in that store is not a character flaw. It is a mathematical trap. It affects millions of people every single day, and almost none of them know it's happening. Today we're talking about boots. But we're really talking about cars, appliances, furniture, tires, mattresses, tools. Every category of goods where the price tag is quietly destroying the financial lives of those who can only afford to shop there. We're going to follow the math, not the motivation. By the end, you'll look at your spending in a different way. I understand how this feels. Nobody who has ever been broke is making bad choices because they don't care. They're making hard choices with limited resources. The system they navigate was not designed to help them win. It was designed to make their situation worse over time without ever announcing itself. I'm here to show you a mechanism. A trap door built into every discount aisle in every store. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It starts with a pair of boots. Why do two people buying boots end up in radically different financial situations 10 years later? Purely based on which shelf they shop from. We'll build this out piece by piece. You'll understand why a dangerous financial decision feels most responsible. The math, Boots theory, and the hidden cost of poverty. The concept is called Boots theory, articulated by author Terry Pratchett in his Discworld novels. The character Samuel Vimes explains it. A man earning $38 a month cannot afford $50 boots. Even though the $50 boots last 10 years and are cheaper long-term, he could only afford $10 boots. But the $10 boots fall apart after one winter. So he spends $10 every year. After 10 years, he spent $100 on uncomfortable, water-leaking boots, now a pile of useless leather. The man who could afford the $50 boots has spent $50, has warm, dry feet, and boots that might last 15 years. This is not a parable. This is the arithmetic of poverty. Let me make it even more concrete. Imagine two people. Person A earns $40,000 a year. Person B earns $90,000. They both need work boots in January. Person A buys the $30 pair, tight on rent. Person B spends $150 on quality boots with a 10-year warranty. Here's what happens over the next decade. Person A's boots last about 8 months. Maybe they get them glued for $5, stretching it to 11 months. Then they buy another pair. This repeats roughly 9 times over 10 years. That's $270 in boots. Person B replaces their boots once, maybe twice, over the same period. $300 total, max. And that's before we account for Person A's boots letting in water, causing a foot infection, leading to a doctor's visit and a $70 antibiotic prescription. The person who spent less money on boots spent more money on boots. Let that sit for a second. The person who made the responsible, budget-conscious decision paid a poverty premium, a hidden surcharge on being unable to afford quality, costing them more over time. Boots are just the entry point. This dynamic plays out with car tires, where the cheap pair blows out sooner, causes a rim replacement, and potentially a dangerous accident. It plays out with refrigerators, where the budget model breaks down in year 4, while the more expensive Energy Star model is still running in year 11. It plays out with car maintenance. The person who cannot afford the $200 oil change pays $1,200 for an engine problem 6 months later. Economists call this the cost of poverty premium. The poor don't just have less money. They pay more for the same goods and services, specifically because they lack upfront capital. It is a structural surcharge on being broke. The market sees it as normal. The math is visible to anyone who looks. You can prove buying cheap boots costs more. But that proof is useless to the person with $40 and rent due Friday. Knowing the better deal exists doesn't make it accessible. That gap is where poverty compounds. The system. Why this is not your fault. This is not a problem you can solve with better decision-making. You cannot willpower your way out of Boots theory. Boots theory is not a personal failure. It is a structural feature of an economic system. A system that prices goods in a way that punishes low cash reserves. Let me explain what I mean by structural. In the United States, median wages have grown about 17% since 1979. In that same period, the cost of housing is up over 200%. Healthcare costs have risen 300%. Higher education tuition has gone up over 500%. The goods that matter most to long-term financial stability have become dramatically more expensive. This is not a coincidence. This is the output of decades of policy, corporate strategy, and labor market decisions. So when we talk about someone being unable to afford the good boots, we have to understand what unable to afford means. For a household in the bottom 40% of income earners, fixed costs consume between 75 and 90% of take-home pay. What remains is not discretionary. It is survival allocation. In that context, the $50 boots are not a worse financial decision. They are a financial decision the system has made impossible. There's a second mechanism at work. Financial scarcity taxes cognitive bandwidth. A brain managing constant financial stress operates with measurably reduced capacity for complex planning. Their research found that poverty-induced cognitive load reduces effective IQ by approximately 13 points. The mental load of being broke makes you worse at making financial decisions, not because you're less intelligent, because your operating system is overwhelmed. And the decisions that look irrational from the outside, buying the cheap boots instead of saving for the good ones, buying lottery tickets, taking a payday loan, often make perfect sense inside a mind managing genuine scarcity without adequate resources. This matters enormously because the entire industry of personal finance advice is built on the assumption that decision-making is the problem. If you just budget better, save more, delay gratification, make smarter choices, you'll be fine. But if cognitive bandwidth itself is impaired by scarcity, then advice demanding better decision-making is prescribing a cure the disease makes harder to take. It's telling someone with a broken leg to walk faster. Now add to this the architecture of modern retail. Discount stores, dollar stores, and budget retailers are not charities. They are engineered to extract maximum revenue from price-sensitive consumers. The products on their shelves are priced to appear affordable while being designed for rapid replacement. Planned obsolescence is a real, documented business strategy since the 1920s. The cheap boots don't just happen to wear out faster. In many cases, they are manufactured to wear out faster, because the store makes more money selling you 3 pairs than 1. Here is the full picture, and it is genuinely infuriating once you see it assembled. A low-income worker earns stagnant wages that have not kept pace with the cost of essential goods. Their cognitive resources are depleted by the stress of managing scarcity. They are targeted by discount retail that sells them low-quality goods at a per-use cost, actually higher than premium alternatives. When those goods fail prematurely, they cannot afford the maintenance or replacement that would stop the cascade, so a boot becomes a foot problem. A foot problem becomes a missed workday. A missed workday becomes a late rent payment. A late rent payment becomes a credit hit. A credit hit becomes a higher interest rate on the next loan they need to cover the gap. Every step of this chain has a transaction cost. Every transaction cost flows upward to retailers, to lenders, to landlords as profit. Poverty is not a static condition. It is a dynamic system that actively extracts value from the people inside it and deposits that value into the accounts of those outside it. The cheap boots are not a starting point. They are a mechanism. I want to be very careful here. Because everything I say in this section can go wrong in one specific way. It can start to sound like the advice I just spent 10 minutes criticizing, the Just Make Better Choices framework dressed up in smarter language. So I'm going to be as honest as I can, and that means starting with an uncomfortable truth. There is no individual strategy that fully escapes a structural problem. If wages haven't kept pace with costs, no budgeting system closes that gap. If cognitive bandwidth is genuinely depleted by scarcity, willpower alone isn't the answer. If the products available in your price range are engineered to fail, buying differently requires having access to a different market. The real exit from Boots theory is systemic. Higher wages, lower fixed costs, accessible credit at fair rates, quality goods in affordable markets. Those are political and economic solutions, not personal finance solutions, and I think it's dishonest to pretend otherwise. But I also believe that seeing the mechanism clearly, understanding what is happening and why, changes how you navigate it. Not perfectly, not completely, but meaningfully. So here is what actually helps inside the constraints of the system as it exists. The first thing is to apply Boots theory analysis before any significant purchase. Not guilt, not shame. Analysis. When you're looking at a product, the question is not, can I afford this right now? The question is, what is the true cost per year of use? A $30 boot worn for 8 months costs $45 a year. A $120 boot worn for 5 years costs $24 a year. When you can frame the decision that way, you start to see where the premium product is actually the budget decision. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that reframing allows you to justify saving for a few extra weeks to access the tier that actually costs less over time. The second thing is to be strategic about where you apply quality logic. You cannot upgrade everything at once, and trying to do so will bankrupt you faster than the cheap boots ever would. Pick the categories where you experience the highest frequency of replacement, the highest cost of failure, or the most severe physical consequences. Work boots for a tradesperson, tires for someone who drives in difficult conditions, a refrigerator for a family. These are the categories where Boots theory bites hardest. A cheap phone case or a discount picture frame is not your financial crisis. A failing car tire at highway speed or a broken furnace in January is. The third thing, and this is the one that requires the most honesty, is to recognize that access to quality often requires access to capital, which requires access to credit, which in America means playing the credit score game, whether you like it or not. There is a reason predatory lenders cluster in low-income neighborhoods. They are serving people excluded from mainstream credit markets. The FICO score is a privately operated behavior compliance system that gates access to economic participation. Understanding it, using it strategically, building it deliberately, protecting it with real care, is not capitulating to a broken system. It's learning the rules of the game you are actually in. Because here is what nobody tells you about Boots theory. It runs both directions. The poverty premium is real. But so is the wealth premium. The phenomenon where having capital access allows wealthy consumers to pay less per unit of value across almost every spending category. Good credit means lower mortgage rates, lower car loan rates, lower insurance premiums. Access to bulk purchasing means lower per unit grocery costs. Access to preventive health care means avoiding the catastrophic costs of untreated illness. Wealth does not just add money to your life. It systematically reduces the price of living. So the goal, when you're working your way out, is not just to earn more. It's to stack the small moves that migrate you from the poverty premium tier toward the wealth premium tier. A secured credit card used correctly for 6 months. An emergency fund of even $500 that means the next unexpected expense doesn't go on a payday loan. A single high-quality item purchased per season instead of 3 cheap ones. These are not dramatic moves. They are the kinds of incremental shifts that the compound interest of financial stability eventually amplifies into something real. I want to close with something that I think matters more than any of the tactics I just described. The shame that the financial system has attached to being broke is deliberate. It is the most powerful tool available to keep you from noticing the mechanism. As long as you believe that your financial situation is a reflection of your character, your discipline, your intelligence, your effort, you will keep directing your frustration inward. And you will keep buying solutions, books, courses, budgeting apps, motivational content. The personal finance industry generates billions of dollars from people who believe the problem is inside them. The problem is not inside you. Part of it is in the system. The boots know that. The math knows that. And now, so do you. That's what Boots theory really is. Not just a story about footwear. It's a story about how an economy built to reward existing capital extracts resources from those without it, invisibly, continuously, one cheap boot at a time. And the first step to changing any of that, personally, politically, economically, is to see it clearly. Thanks for watching. If this hit differently than your usual finance content, it's because it was supposed to. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And I'll see you in the next one.